Thank you for joining me. Today, we're going to be talking about a topic that I think needs a little more space in couples therapy and also the general public conversation. We're going to be talking about when social media poisons our relationship expectations. Let me tell you what I mean by that. A lot of times, I have couples in therapy who have this sometimes expressed, sometimes unexpressed expectation for what their relationship is supposed to be. That can be a couple dating, married, engaged, whatever it is. They have this idea of what their life is supposed to be like. And if you're listening to this and saying, well, this can branch into other areas, sure, that might be an episode for another time. I want to focus on the couples, though. Let's go over some of the basics of where social media is nowadays. Social media is where we tend to post our best features or moments. Whether we're willing to admit it or not, social media is often where we are looking for recognition and connection with other people. Sometimes it can be just sharing, but if we're honest with ourselves, a lot of times we do like that positive feedback, and there's part of us that wants to get that. That's part of the reason we do it. Originally, social media was a way to share things interpersonally. There's the dark side of Facebook. You know, if you don't know, the original origin of Facebook was to rate women on a college campus. That's why it's Facebook. But originally, what we hoped out of social media, once it grew out of that, was a way to connect with people around you. One of the early selling points was to be able to talk with and engage with people that you otherwise wouldn't be able to. Over time, though, social media moved from just this engagement with others into a business. And now we have tons and tons of young people whose great career aspiration is to be an influencer. They want to leverage social media for their career, for their employment, for their ability to make their way in the world. And so they create these online personas, hoping that a company will pick them up for a sponsorship, or they'll gain enough views to be able to run ads or whatever it is. The last thing important to talk about in social media right now is that it's incredibly manicured, okay? The things that we see on there, we can intellectually understand that social media posts have been perfected or edited. Pretty much everybody could admit that. However, one thing that we don't take into account is just how much we forget that as we're scrolling and looking through, because that thought process of, well, this isn't real. It takes a little bit of thinking, and as we doom scroll, and I'm guilty of this as well, you sometimes come to assume that someone's life is really what you see. So let me tell you what I mean by relationship expectations. We often gain expectations from the world around us. It's pretty much where we gain that baseline. It's where we start to build from, okay? We see relationship expectations in family. And when I'm talking about relationships, I'm talking about romantic primarily, but we see from our parents how we're supposed to interact in an interpersonal and romantic relationship. How do they treat one another? Are they kind or forgiving, or are they short? Is there passive-aggressive interaction, right? Do you see your parents have a loving interaction? Are they affectionate, or are they matter-of-fact and in a more business mindset? So that's one way we can see that type of dynamic play out. We also have relationship expectations from friends. So we can have friends whose significant others treat them wonderfully, and we start to wonder to ourselves, what am I missing out on? Or we can see someone acting in a negative way, and we say, goodness, I'm so glad I'm not them. We also get expectations from culture. We look around us and we see celebrities or, popular figures. And these popular figures, whether we like to admit it or not, start to influence the way that we see ourselves, the way that we see partners. I've heard sometimes as a half joke that, the spark isn't alive, or I have to be kept, or you're boring me. And part of that comes from seeing things online I don't know if people really read through magazines anymore, but that sort of dynamic where you see how in love these popular people are. I think reality TV can also play into this whole culture thing as well. And reality TV isn't real for those that are unaware. The last place that we see relationship expectations are in overall influences. It might not be in popular culture. It can be in religious orientation. If we have some sort of central belief about ourselves, the world around us, and those beliefs give us expectations for relationships, sure, we can take it from something like that. We can also build expectations upon our own thinking. This is what I would want, or this is what I think I should expect. All right, now, there are good and bad expectations. How we should treat others and how we should be treated is a good expectation. It's healthy boundaries, although, that can go overboard. Some people could say, well, I should be treated as royalty always. That's a problem, right? Because life isn't a fairy tale. And some people feel as if we should only treat certain people in the same way that they treat us. There's this idea that you don't owe anyone anything, which on the surface can sound okay, except for the fact that if you're in a committed relationship, sometimes one of you is doing better than the other. And that can be in the day, the hour, whatever it is. Sometimes you need to do things for people and sacrifice for people when they cannot immediately pay you back. Although we should have good boundaries. If people are routinely hateful or want little of us, they just don't see us as worthy or something that they should pay attention to, yeah, you should have a good expectation that way. Don't let other people treat you like crap. Now, we should expect things in a relationship. I know there are differing values on this, but there are things that we should expect, and they cannot just be from the negatives. What I mean by the negatives is you can't just say, I don't want this, or my partner shouldn't hit me, or my partner shouldn't be hateful. If you build a whole relationship on what shouldn't happen, you don't get very far, because without a goal in mind, without some sort of end to attain, you don't get anything, right? It ends up being lukewarm and unhelpful. So we can have great expectations of what to expect in a relationship. One of the primary ones that I talk to couples about a lot is an expectation of growth. What I mean by growth is often emotional, but it can be career or personal or whatever have you, right? You can have this expectation that we're going to continually find greater versions of ourselves. We find greater versions in the other person or children, whatever it is. That's a great expectation to have. That doesn't mean that everything will always be positive, but trajectory, right? These expectations, like I said before, can be good or bad. It depends on whether they're realistic. And that's something I'm going to go into here in a second. But these expectations that we have, sometimes we don't know whether they're realistic or not. We can be fooled. We can be disillusioned. We can be lost in this idea that there's this positive thing that we're missing, right? That's a terrible expectation because, remember, social media isn't real. So, why does all of this create a problem? I'm going to use a phrase that my dad told me years ago that I thought was silly. But of course, once I got older, I realized there was some good in it. The thing that he told me was, you should never compare your bloopers to someone's highlight reels. Now, my dad's not a psychologist. Okay, he doesn't know all of the in-depth neurochemistry and advanced learning that happens over the lifespan. That's not his thing, and that's perfectly fine. But there's something really important in that. Our brains are designed to keep us safe. If we can see danger and if we can find the negative, we stay alive. This is why the brain sometimes sits in or ruminates on bad thoughts or negative things, because it helps keep us alive and stable. Ergo, it's much easier to focus on the negative than it is the positive. So, oftentimes when we look at our bloopers, the volume is turned up. Sometimes it's because of anxiety, but a lot of times it's just how our brain is wired. And then we compare our worst moments to people's bests. And we start to assume that our bloopers are our default and others' highlights are theirs. And when we think about this psychologically, it creates this dynamic where someone must be of better quality or personhood than I am. When we compare our bloopers, the things that we do wrong, where we mess up, to people's highlight reels, neither one of us is human. And when we start to do this over a long period of time, we start to believe that what we see is real. I think tabloids were a really big indication of this in the past. Prior to the internet being what it is today, a lot of people saw those relationship dynamics and thought, wow, that's so magical. I want that. And I'll pretty much guarantee you, you do not. Because something interesting has popped up in social media over time. What you see online is so manicured, it's often fake. There's an interesting paradigm that pops up that I don't know if there's research behind it, but I've seen it play out as true, so I'm going to hold to it. For those that post about their relationship in such a positive way all of the time, there's a very high likelihood that their relationship sucks. Those who have a healthy and stable relationship don't really need to go online and try to gain affirmation. It's those that are insecure that will do that all of the time. The problem is the viewer, someone who is unaware of that dynamic, will see, my goodness, they're just having a positive interaction all of the time, without realizing that since they're posting all the time, things probably aren't okay. And so what we see as real is actually just a facade. It's a mask. It's fake. However, when we look at this stuff for long enough, we start to assume that other people have something that we do not. We are missing out on a relationship that could be magical. And this is where a lot of the problems show up. See, social media isn't just recipes. It isn't just interesting topics. People see things on social media and assume that that's how things should be. There have been some documentaries over time that have shown just how fake everything is, about how color saturation is shifted and everything else. But if you take in enough of this information, you start to assume that what a normal, healthy relationship is something that's boring or unfulfilling. So you start seeking the grass that's on the other side. You start to wonder if the forbidden fruit really is as sweet as others seem to show it to be. And so you start considering making drastic changes. If you believe that there's something out there that you are really, really missing and that your life won't be complete, you might even make such a drastic change that you alienate people. I'll give you an example of something I've seen before where a couple had a pretty normal and average relationship. And when I say average, I don't mean bad. I don't mean that it was sad or worthless, but they were stable. They had kids and things were pretty good. Now, were they doing incredible things all the time? Were they wildly romantic? No, but it was a great framework to build from. There wasn't any part of that relationship where I thought, man, these guys are in deep trouble. It was just, how can we breathe life into this marriage that has been stable for so long? Because sometimes life gets weary and sometimes it wears us down. Well, in this relationship that I'm talking about, one of the partners started to think that there was something magical on the other side, that there was something that they were missing, and this other person they were talking to could give it to them. And so they basically spiked their marriage. They threw it out and forever affected their relationship with their children for a lie. And for this client who took that risk, they found out on the other side that what they had fantasized about, what they had really seen as something wonderful, really wasn't. That they had risked a life that was easily able to be improved for something that was entirely and wholly empty. That what they had assumed from social media and the lies that they had believed themselves, they had thrown away something that could have been wonderful, and instead they forever scarred their children. Now, is this always the case? No. A lot of times, couples never get to that point where someone just decides that they want out. They want to throw everything away and seek for their new realm of happiness. Side note, I'm so sick and tired of hearing people chasing their happiness. It's fleeting and childish. Another podcast for another time. But in many ways, people just see that and become discontent, and it affects their relationships. Now, let's talk about what we do with all of this, because, some people will say, what, are we not supposed to look at other people, just assume that what we have is what we're supposed to be okay with? Sorta. Not exactly, but in some ways, I think we could use a little bit of disconnection. One of the first things that I talk about with couples when they feel this way is to get off of social media. Some people might see this as a dumb gesture. Well, okay, well, I'm not cheating. Why do I need to get off social media? There's two big reasons. One, what we've talked about today, it can pull you away and make you think there's something magical out there. But two, it can distract you from the little moments that you're missing. For every moment that you watch a video or a reel of someone living a magical life, you've missed out on a genuine opportunity to connect with your partner or spouse. It's those little things that I've seen carry marriages over time. These big events, the vacations, the traveling, all of that ends up being something cool and worthy of remembering, but it doesn't cement a relationship. So for couples that are wondering about discontent, get off social media and see if what you're taking in is this fake understanding of a relationship or healthy dynamic that you've subconsciously just assumed is real. I would encourage you, find couples that are doing well, that seem happy and content. I will tell you, for the couples that are most happy and content, they're not all the time, because their goal isn't to be happy. Their goal is to be connected. And because there are two people involved, sometimes relationships are difficult. They shouldn't be all the time. But for the couples that do well, they're ones that remember that the hard times are temporary, that the struggle they have a day doesn't have to play out into the week. So if you are wondering what relationships could be, I would encourage you, go find a couple that is doing marriage or relationship well. Nowadays, it's becoming more difficult to find. Something interesting is marriages are actually stabilizing in terms of divorce. And people would assume, oh my goodness, that's great. Marriages are working out. No. It's not that more people are getting divorced percentage-wise. It's just that people aren't getting married. They don't find the need for commitment. So if you're looking for how relationships work long-term, you need to find people who seem content and still in love with their partner or spouse over many years. See what keeps things going for them. What are their expectations, and are those expectations good enough? Are there some things that you assumed were pointless that aren't? Are there dynamics that you could be missing out on because you're looking for a picture-perfect ideal in another person? I would also encourage you to see how you can improve in your relationship. So many times, and I'll even push that one step further, pretty much every couple I see comes in and tells me how the other person can improve. They may or may not be right, but I will tell you they're missing the point. If you want your relationship to be better, see how you can improve. Because if each partner is introspective, if they can see themselves and understand what's going on, they can connect with the other person. If you want it to get better, start with you. One of the most important things that I will say, and something I hope that you've gained from all of this, if you want your relationship to be better, see what you can be grateful for. I've had too many clients and heard too many stories where people had the quote-unquote good life. They just weren't grateful for it. They had a partner who worked hard, came home, and did their best to connect, and it wasn't good enough for some reason, only to find out upon divorce that it was the best thing that they could have. Or they had a partner that was loving, but sometimes struggled, and they assumed that, well, this just isn't going to work, when in reality, complexity is a part of life and no one's perfect. See what you can be grateful for in your own relationship, in the things that might seem minor, but in reality can make all of the difference for yourself and even for children. I will tell you lastly, don't try to mimic perfection. Embrace complexity and find courage to speak up and work on yourself. Too many times I've seen couples see this ideal and wholly miss out. They've looked towards perfection only to find that they had beauty right in front of them that they failed to admire. Know that life's difficult. That's what makes it meaningful. When there's struggles, when money's tight, when kids are difficult and your partner frustrates you, it's a part of the long-term beauty. Social media is only that snapshot. It's a little picture of manicured perfection, and it never helped anybody. Thank you for listening in today. I hope you got something useful. If you found this episode beneficial enough, I hope that you follow the podcast and share it with other people. If you feel the need, you can leave something in the tip jar to help pay for the production of this podcast. Thank you and have a great day.